Italy has more than 7,000 municipalities. Cities, towns, villages, hamlets, the lot. Most of them are working, breathing places with bakers and butchers and schools and washing on the line. That was true of every town in this video too. It was true of the largest of them right up until the evening of the 9th of October, 1963. At 10:39 that night, a mountainside on the eastern flank of the Vajont Reservoir collapsed into the water below. The displaced wave rose 250 meters into the air, vaulted over the top of what was then the tallest dam in the world, and fell onto the town of Longarone in a single mass. It killed roughly 2,000 people in 7 minutes. The dam is still standing. The town is not. We found 10 places in Italy like this. Subscribe and stick with us through to number 1. The Vajont Dam was approved by engineers who knew the mountain was unstable, but it was built anyway. It is the worst civil engineering disaster in European history. Almost no one outside Italy has ever heard of it. We start with number 10. Number 10. Consonno, Lombardy. Drive north from Milan into the foothills of the Pre-Alps. Take a left at the town of Olginati and follow a road that ends at a fence. Beyond the fence is what is left of Consonno, the village a Milanese count tried to turn into the Las Vegas of Italy. Consonno was a working agricultural hamlet for centuries, perched on a wooded ridge above Lake Como. In 1962, a businessman named Mario Bagno bought the entire village outright. He demolished almost everything. In its place, he built a minaret, a fake medieval castle, a Chinese pagoda, a shopping arcade, a hotel, and a string of lights you could see from the lake at night. It was, briefly, a destination. Coaches came up from Milan. The hotel had 100 rooms. But in 1976, the only road into Consonno collapsed in a landslide. The Italian state never rebuilt it. Therefore, the Count's empire was left to rot at the end of an unreachable track, which it still is. What you find now, if you can get to it, is the strangest abandoned site in Lombardy. A concrete minaret leaning into the trees. A pagoda roof half collapsed. A pub sign for a hotel nobody has slept in for 50 years. The fence is for your safety. The danger is real. The dream that built it is the part that is harder to explain. There are 9 more. Number 9. Balestrino, Liguria. The drive between Albenga and Tirano on the Italian Riviera takes you past olive groves, a couple of small petrol stations, and a hillside village that nobody lives in. From the road, Balestrino looks like 100 other Ligurian hill towns. Stone houses stacked on top of each other, terracotta roofs, a campanile at the top. The difference is that not one of those houses has had anyone home since 1953, Tuscany. Balestrino is medieval. The oldest documents that mention it date from the 11th century. By the late 1800s, around 850 people lived in the upper village, growing olives on the surrounding terraces. But the entire hillside Balestrino was built on has been moving for at least 2 centuries. The houses cracked, the streets cracked, the bell tower leaned. By the early 20th century, the engineers brought in by the regional government concluded that the village was sliding into the valley below, slowly but unstoppably. They told the residents to leave. In 1953, the last family walked out. A new Balestrino was built half a mile down the slope on more stable ground. The old village was left exactly where it stood. It is still there now, fenced off, photographed by drone enthusiasts, and slipping by a few millimeters every year. The Italian government has classified it as too dangerous to enter and too historically significant to demolish. Therefore, it does the only thing left to do. It waits. Number 8. Pentedattilo, Calabria. Pentedattilo means 5 fingers in Greek. Look at the cliff face the village is built into on the southern tip of the Italian mainland, and you will see why. 5 enormous fingers of grey sandstone rise out of the mountainside, with a hamlet of medieval stone houses nestled into the gaps between them. The Greeks founded Pentedattilo in the 7th century BC. The Normans rebuilt it in the 11th century. For the next 900 years, it housed a small farming community of around 2,000 people at its peak, who grew bergamot, olives, and figs on the terraces below. But the rock is sandstone, which is a polite way of saying it is crumbling. Major earthquakes in 1783 and 1908 loosened parts of the cliff face directly above the houses. One of the 5 fingers cracked clean down the middle. Falling rock killed several residents over the next half-century. By 1968, the regional government in Reggio Calabria condemned the entire upper village. The last residents were rehoused in the valley. The houses were left empty, the chapel was sealed, and the road was allowed to grow over. What you find at Pentedattilo now is a half-restored shell. Artists have moved into 1 or 2 of the buildings as a summer colony. The rest of it is medieval stone, in slow conversation with a cracked geological hand that will eventually come down on top of it. Calabria has a lot of these. Most people outside Italy have never heard of Apice. The town sits 40 kilometers east of Naples, in the hills above the Calore River. It is a complete medieval village, fortified and walled, with a baronial castle at the top and a network of stone streets you could fit on a postcard. There has not been a permanent resident inside it since 1980. Apice was founded in the 7th century by Lombard settlers, expanded by the Normans, then fortified during the wars between the Kingdom of Naples and the Papal States. By the 1960s, it was a working town of around 6,000 people. A bakery, a school, 2 churches, a Roman aqueduct still feeding the fountains. In 1962, an earthquake damaged most of the buildings in the upper village. The Italian government built a temporary settlement of prefabricated huts at the foot of the hill. They told residents the resettlement would last 18 months, while the old village was repaired. Then in 1980, a much bigger earthquake hit. The Irpinia earthquake killed nearly 3,000 people across southern Italy. In Apice, the old buildings that had survived 1962 finished cracking. The repair plan was abandoned. The temporary huts became the new town. The medieval village above them was left alone. You can walk through it today because no fence has ever been built. The castle is still standing. The cathedral roof is missing. The Italian state owns the entire village and has no plan for what to do with it. But this is where the countdown stops being about land and starts being about water. Number 6. Curon Venosta, also called Graun, in South Tyrol. Drive north through the South Tyrolean Alps toward the Austrian border, and at a certain point the road skirts the edge of a lake called Lake Resia. Look out across the water and you will see a 14th century church bell tower sticking up out of the surface. Just the tower. No church, no village, no nothing. The bell tower is the only thing left of Curon Venosta, also known by its German name Graun, drowned by a hydroelectric dam in 1950. Graun had existed since the 12th century. Roughly 900 people lived there in Ninite in 49. It had a Romanesque church, a parish school, 3 inns, and a primary economy of cattle farming and alpine tourism. The decision to flood the valley was made in Rome. A consortium had been planning the merger of 3 smaller lakes into a single hydroelectric reservoir since the 1920s. Mussolini's government approved the scheme. The Second World War paused construction. The post-war Italian state restarted it. The residents protested. They wrote to the Pope. They held referendums. They organised marches to Bolzano. None of it changed anything. In July 1950, the dam closed, and the valley filled with water in a matter of weeks. If you are enjoying these, hit subscribe, because there are more of these for every country in Europe, and we will get to the worst one we found in a moment. But first, the village that comes back. What you see at Lake Resia now is one of the most photographed sites in the Italian Alps. A bell tower in the middle of a lake. The Italian state did not bother to demolish it. Number 5. Fabbriche di Careggine in Tuscany. While Curon was being drowned in the Alps, a different drowning was happening 500 miles south, in the Tuscan mountains north of Lucca. Fabbriche di Careggine is a 13th century village originally built by ironworkers from Resia. By the early 20th century, it had around 30 households, a parish church, a graveyard, and a small inn. In 1946, an Italian state-owned electricity company began construction of a dam at the head of the Edron Valley. The residents of Fabbriche were given a year to leave. Compensation was paid. A new settlement was built nearby and named, with no irony intended, Vagli Sotto. The dam closed in 1953. The village vanished under 50 meters of water. The Italian state moved on to other projects. But Fabbriche di Careggine is not like Curon. Every decade or so, the reservoir is drained for maintenance, and when the water goes, the village comes back. Stone houses, the graveyard, the bell tower, the bridge across what used to be the village square, all of it standing exactly as it was in 1946. The last drain was 1994. The next was scheduled for 2020 and then cancelled. The Italian electricity company has not given a date for the next one. If you stand on the road above Lake Vagli on a clear day, you can still see the outline of the bell tower under the water. Locals say you can hear the bells when the wind is wrong. Number 4. Poggioreale, Sicily. Most of the abandoned places in Italy were taken slowly. Number 4 was taken in a single night. In western Sicily, in the Valle del Belice, there is a town that has not been occupied by anyone since the early hours of the 15th of January 1968. Poggioreale was founded in the 17th century by a Sicilian baron, and by the 1960s it housed around 2,700 people. It had a main piazza, a fascist-era town hall, 3 churches, 2 cinemas and a primary school. Then, at 3 in the morning on the 15th of January, an earthquake hit the Belice Valley. The first shock was a 6.4. It was followed by 2 more in quick succession. 296 people died across the valley. In Poggioreale, every single building suffered structural damage. The Italian state declared the town uninhabitable within 48 hours. The survivors were moved to a tent camp 3 miles down the road. A new Poggioreale was eventually built at the bottom of the hill. The old town was meant to be demolished. It never was. The funds ran out, the political will evaporated, and the place was left exactly as it had been at 3 in the morning on the 15th of January. You can walk into it today. The fascist town hall still has its insignia carved above the door. The cinema still has rows of seats. The main piazza still has a fountain in the middle, except the fountain has been dry since the moment the shock hit. The Belice earthquake left more than one Poggioreale. Number 3. Gibellina Vecchia, Sicily. 20 miles north of Poggioreale, the same earthquake destroyed a town called Gibellina. The town had been there since the Saracens. In 1968, it had a population of around 6,000, a Baroque cathedral, and a reputation for the best red wine in the valley. After the earthquake, almost nothing of any of that was left standing. A new Gibellina was built 15 miles to the west. The old Gibellina, by then a field of rubble, was left to do whatever rubble does. But in 1984, the Italian artist Buri arrived. He had spent the Second World War as a prisoner in a Texas internment camp. He had spent the post-war years making abstract canvases that the Italian art establishment considered the most important in the country. He looked at the ruins of Gibellina and proposed something nobody else would have proposed. He suggested pouring concrete over the entire site, over every street, every doorway, every collapsed house, every memory. A massive shroud, 350 meters long by 280 meters wide, would preserve the shape of the destroyed town beneath a permanent monument of cement. The Italian state, remarkably, said yes. Construction began in 1985 and continued for 30 years. It was finished in 2015. What stands at Gibellina Vecchia now is the Cretto di Buri, the largest single work of land art in Europe. A white concrete labyrinth follows exactly the street plan of the medieval town that used to be there. You can walk through it. You will not enjoy it. Number 2. Krakow Basilicata. Up to this point, every place in this video has been abandoned because of the land beneath it or the water on top of it. Number 2 is the largest and most photographed of them. In the hills of Basilicata, between the Apennines and the Ionian Sea, there is a medieval hill town that has been used as a film location for 9 major motion pictures. The Passion of the Christ was shot there. Quantum of Solace was shot there. Christ Stopped at Eboli was shot there. Krakow is the most photographed ghost town in southern Italy and the most reliably empty. Krakow was founded by Greeks in the 8th century BC and rebuilt by the Lombards in the 8th century AD. It sits on a clay ridge 400 meters above the surrounding valley. By the 1960s, around 2,000 people lived in it. Farmers mostly. Olives, wheat, sheep. But the clay ridge Krakow is built on has been unstable for 2,000 years. Landslides in 1959 and 1972 damaged most of the upper village. A major flood in 1972 opened cracks across the foundations of the cathedral. The residents were evacuated in stages between 1963 and 1980. The last resident left in 1980 after another smaller earthquake confirmed what everyone already knew. Krakow was sliding, slowly, but in only one direction. Therefore, the new Krakow was built on a flat plain 6 miles away. The old Krakow was fenced off, surveyed by drone, and left to the film crews. You can take a guided tour now, in a hard hat, on a roped walkway, for €15. Remember the dam we mentioned in the opening? The one with the wall that is still standing. The mountain knew it was coming. The dam did not. Number 1. The Vajont Dam, Friuli, the 9th of October, 1963. In a valley in the Dolomites, on the border between Friuli and Veneto, there is a concrete dam, 262 meters tall. The tallest dam in the world when it was finished in 1959. Beneath it, in the valley below, there used to be a town called Longarone. The Vajont Dam was built between 1957 and 1959 by an Italian state-owned company called SEID, which stood for the Adriatic Electricity Company. The dam was an engineering triumph. It was approved by Italian regulators, hailed by international press, and visited by foreign delegations. But the mountain on the eastern side of the reservoir, Mount Toc, was unstable. The local population had been saying so for generations. Local geologists had been raising the alarm in regional papers since the mid-1950s. Even the Italian Alpine Club had filed an official objection. The name of the mountain itself, Toc, comes from the local Venetian dialect. It means rotten. The engineers at SEID were briefed on the instability of Mount Toc as early as 1958, before the dam was even finished. Internal company reports identified a slow-moving landslide on the southern flank as a credible risk to the reservoir. The reports were classified. Filling of the reservoir continued. By 1963, the landslide was moving at 3 centimeters a day. Local mayors petitioned Rome. A communist journalist for the regional paper called Tina Merlin ran articles warning of disaster. Sadie sued her for spreading false news. She lost. On the 9th of October 1963, at 10:39 in the evening, the southern flank of Mount Toc collapsed into the reservoir. The wave rose 250 meters. Longarone was gone in 7 minutes. A volume of rock, estimated at 270 million cubic meters, had slid into the lake at 100 meters per second. The displaced water vaulted over the top of the dam and fell onto the town below in a single mass. Longarone and the villages of Pirago, Fay, Villanova and Rivalta were obliterated. Around 2,000 people were killed. The exact number was never established because entire families were erased from the records along with the buildings they had lived in. The dam itself did not break. It is still standing. All 262 meters of it, holding back nothing but a small pond. A monument to the Italian state's willingness to build a structure that worked perfectly, while the mountain beside it killed 2,000 people. Sadie was nationalized the following year. After a trial that ran into the 1970s, 2 engineers received 6-year sentences. Most of those responsible were never prosecuted. If you stand at the base of the dam today, you can see the scar of Mount Toc on the opposite slope. The waveline is still visible on the rock where the water reached. It has been 63 years. The line has not faded. Italy has more than 7,000 municipalities, and we have shown you 10 of them tonight. Some were left by mountains. Some were left by water. One was left by an engineering decision that 2,000 people paid for. There is a particular thing the Italian state has done well historically, which is to build new versions of towns that the old versions could no longer sustain. Half the places in this video have a nuova twin a few miles down the road. Apice nuova, Poggioreale nuova, Gibellina nuova. A working town in plain sight, and the older one fenced off, slipping, drowning, or buried beneath a slab of Alberto Burri's concrete. The thing about a place that has been left is that it goes on being left. Nobody puts it back. The state moves on to the next one. The map keeps the name. The post does not get delivered. Subscribe and we will find the next 10 together.